Hello folks, welcome to Fall Workshop 2024. I'm Barry McCarthy and I just wanted to create a little video regarding keeping the whites of the paper. We're going to use a painting that I've done called Along the Gaspé, and I'm going to show you how to maintain the whites of the paper and maybe how to bring some of the white paper back, and you'll be surprised at some of the stuff I use. Anyways, just before I begin, I just want to encourage you to make sure your process is correct before you get into the masking fluid. My paper is stretched out on a piece of 3/4 inch plywood using industrial staples. The paper's been soaking for no longer than 4 minutes. And I just do it in the sink, make sure the sink is clean. And then I put it on the board wet, and I staple about 1 inch apart all the way around the outside edge. Try not to use too much of the paper because we want to make sure that the painting goes right to the edge. And you let that dry. Half a day is probably plenty before you bring out your pencil. And this is the pencil that I use. It's a really sharp tip, and I sharpen it and keep it sharp using sandpaper block. And I like nice clean edges. Nothing worse than working with a blurry line because you don't know where you're at half the time. Anyways, if the pencil is too dark and you've pushed down too hard, you can use a kneaded eraser. Just keep it clean by pulling it like that, and you can sort of just like dab some of the excess lead out, but enough that you can at least see it. Okay? Now, what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you there's some little white bits that are in the painting, and you got to make sure that you don't use this stuff too much because it'll create a lot of frustration. I don't really like this stuff. I'm not a big fan, but every so often I absolutely need it because I like white paper, and typically we don't use white pigment. So this is called Friskit masking fluid, and it's sort of a latex rubber, and it goes on quite freely. I used to, I don't anymore, but I used to use a little tiny brush like this to get a real sharp line, and then but before you dip it into your masking fluid, you dip it into some soap, some watered down dish soap. That puts a coating on the hairs of the brush, so this stuff will kill a brush. If you use your really good brushes, I guarantee you, trying to get latex rubber out of a paintbrush, like your little paintbrush, it's a nuisance, and it's almost impossible. You might as well throw the brush away. So I stopped using a brush. I use it occasionally, but not often. I have discovered an ink nib, which is brilliant because it even gives you a thinner line. It's easy to clean up, relatively easy to use. You don't need soap. And the latex can be watered down slightly, not too much, because it'll go right into the pores of the paper and you'll never get it out. So I put a tiny little bit to make it become a little more pliable, and I dip my pen nib into the mist kit, and I will be very selective on where I use it. These little telephone poles that are off into the distance are white. If you can see it here, when you've got a large background like that and you want to keep going over and over, not worrying about negative painting, which is probably the best thing to do, you can use this stuff as a bit of a crutch, but again, like I said, you use it too much and it gets away on you. And when I finish a painting and I peel this off, you can peel it off with your finger, or you can peel it off with a crepe little square here that you buy at the art store, and it'll remove the miscut quite freely. But you'll be surprised at the amount of white that you have left, you know, in your painting that you've now got to paint over. And the number of times I've been frustrated with that, I can't tell you. But I'm not a big fan of this stuff, so just be careful when you're using it. I would use it back here in the fence, and the nice thing about the ink nib, like I said, it gives you a real fine line. Try not to smear it, and if you do, if you get it where you don't want it, just wait till it dries and then peel it off and go over it again, okay? Not a problem, not a big deal. So that's the Friskit. Should give you a little tip on buying a brand new bottle of this stuff. I don't know, for some reason these companies think you don't know what the stuff is when you put it on white paper. I can see it's just a very slight green tinge. But what they do is they put dye at the bottom of the container, and what I do, as soon as I get the stuff home, I pour it out and I put it in these little vials, like not all of it, but just the top part, or I'll dump the whole bit out, because you get little containers that are smaller than this, and you can put them in these little medicine vials. And, you know, you can add a little bit of water to it, but basically you're doing that to get rid of the dye at the bottom. So I never use the miscut that's right at the bottom. The dye is way too strong. I've had it actually destroy a painting because the miscut goes into the pores of the paper, and there's a dye there that you can't get rid of unless you scratch it out with a razor blade. So again, it's kind of a love-hate relationship with this stuff, and I even use it in oil paintings to maintain the white of the canvas, to keep track of where my whites are, and it does work for that too. But you got to really take it off the canvas with the crepe material. Another little tidbit that I use to maintain or lighten up some areas of a watercolor, you let it totally dry, and let your painting, you know, hopefully you're probably finished by then. I use an ink eraser sometimes, just to go over the area, especially on a horizon line, to soften the edge, because you don't want a hard edge back in the distance. It's supposed to stay soft anyways. Another this is something I use quite often. It's an X-Acto blade, a little tiny one, and you buy them in packages like this. They're very handy. You can buy the handle if you want. I don't. And I scratch the surface of the paper to remove the color, and it actually works quite well. You can take off a little bit, or you can take off a lot and get right down below the surface of the paper and bring back the white. The only downside of that is you've wrecked the surface of the paper and you can't paint over it. Okay? I had a friend that with the old Arch paper actually sanded out a whole area of a painting, in a painting that he didn't want, or an area of the painting that he didn't want, with sandpaper. And then he was able to paint over it, which was brilliant. I mean, I've never seen that before, but with this other paper now, the starch is different. It's not animal glue, so they use a different kind of artificial glue. So I wouldn't advise that. That'll wreck the surface of your paper, but you can get away with it with a blade, and I use it quite often, especially in blades of grass, up along edges here. Maybe there's a little fire back in here. I may use it on the edge, but not too much. Okay. Another item I found was white Conte. And I got into a situation on a painting once where I was painting a big iceberg, and it was a 7-foot painting. And I lost the edge of the iceberg against this really dark sky. I was working on Lana paper, and the whole edge of the Lana paper separated, and I was ripping the paper. I was pulling the miscut off. So you got to be really careful with that. anyways, I saved the painting by using chalk and white Conte, and I just basically went over the edge. And the nice thing about this stuff is that it doesn't reflect light. It absorbs the light, so it looks like the paper itself. I have used gouache, white gouache. If I needed to, I will. There's, you know, there's no rules really here in painting, and if you know the rule, you can break it. That's my motto. I don't know if, I think Wyeth has mixed some whites with his pigments just to give it a different color, but it is opaque, and it does change your whole painting, so I'd be careful with using white pigment. I try to stay away from it as much as possible. I like keeping it pure. And the other little bit is you can actually no, I guess that's it. That's about where I needed to be with bringing back white of the paper. And again, peeling it off is not a nuisance. Actually, repainting your white areas can be. I think you got to be maybe a little more conscious of your edges. And there's something in the business called lost edges. So you don't want everything to be so hard-edged, and the mist kit will give you that. So what you got to do is maybe go back in there with a blade just to soften everything and make it more like a painting than a real sharp focused photograph. Okay, anyways, that's it for now, and good luck with all of that, and we'll see you at the workshop. Take care. Bye-bye.